We are well, blessed and highly favored.
Wonderful.
Greetings. Greetings, everyone. Akwaba, welcome. Thank you all for joining us this blessed evening for our KMTspeaks series for May. We're glad that you all are able to be here. You know, of course, there's no lack of things that our community can discuss. And so this is just like all the other times, plenty of things to talk about and to share, and plenty of good dialogue that we hope to have. So thank you all for joining us. Tonight we're presenting the next chapter of our KMTspeaks series. And KMTspeaks is an online gathering that pretty much came from, you know, the pandemic happened and people were spread out everywhere, but there was still plenty of things for us to discuss and to share and to build on. So we started this series and we've had a variety of different speakers come on. We've had Baba Hali Garima, we've had Baba Malefi Asante, we've had some other brothers and sisters who have had a variety of different things to share and to talk about. So we've definitely had a very, very good series of things that have happened. Tonight we're discussing the movie Sinners. Sister Nozibile is going to speak a little bit later about that. Kemet Speaks came from the Brotherhood of Kemet, which was founded here in Atlanta in 1988. It was started by some elders and some brothers that attended Morehouse. So it's an African-centered brotherhood that historically, you know, we came from a space of deciding, hey, we want to have an option for us to be unapologetically African and African men. And there weren't many options at the time that allowed us to fully express being an African man. So that's what Kemet came from. Sister Nozibile is in our set. She can give you a brief intro of our set, and then we'll continue our presentation.
Okay, thank you, Arturo. Set in the African Sisterhood was founded in 1989 on Spelman's campus in revolutionary response to racism, sexism, and classism inherent in Western society. We are a Pan-African sisterhood committed to the liberation of people worldwide. We are a rites of passage program, which means that our organization not only is transformative, but it is healing as well. So if you have any questions about it, you know, any women that are strong, beautiful, powerful, intelligent women that you know, want to fight back and help us reclaim our Africanness, hit me up afterwards.
Thank you much, Sister Nozibile. And also the same for Kemet. If you have any brothers who are interested in joining an African organization, an African brotherhood, you can drop a link in the chat as well. And when we have further information about Kemet, then we can also let you know. So Nozibile, go ahead and say a little bit about this here movie.
Okay. So Sinners is a 2025 horror film that was produced, written, and directed by your boy Ryan Coogler. I really appreciated how he dealt with Creed. A lot of people know Ryan Coogler from Black Panther, and he has done other films as well. It's set in 1932 in the Mississippi Delta, and it stars Michael B. Jordan as brothers who return to their hometown and all of a sudden they are confronted by a supernatural evil. And the supernatural evil you would think is racism, but it's something much, much more. And so that is a brief background of the film.
So Sinners seems to be gaining a lot of ground, both domestically and internationally. I heard that the budget was roughly 90 something million. And actually, Ryan Coogler did something that seems to be different within the film world, where he actually negotiated one to be able to get access to some of his income prior to the producer gaining all of theirs. And then also, he's able to have ownership over his film after 25 years.
Mhm.
So there are some revolutionary elements when it comes within the filming industry that he was able to negotiate. And actually, I think that's good. It gives, similar to people talking about hip hop music or other genres of music where they're talking about their masters. So he's able to negotiate a situation where he'll get the masters of his film, God willing, during his lifetime. So that's definitely
Yeah.
something that is good, and definitely definitely hats off to him for that. So what would
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, and I was saying that, and go ahead, Arturo, did you have a little bit more to say about that?
Oh no, I was just gonna move into the next part.
Oh, okay. I know a lot of people are saying, like, with all the things that are going on in the world today, why are we talking about a movie, right? The world is in a crazy state right now, and there's so many things for African people to talk about. There's so many things for African people to debate. But I think this is a perfect topic because Sinners is, or anytime you have something that says that is a representation of African culture and African life and African belief, you have to examine, right? Because when you put these types of things out in public, people consume them. And some people don't have the tools or the vocabulary to distinguish what is real, what is fiction, what is detrimental, and what is helpful. And a lot of times when we take these things into our minds, into our spirits, even though watching a film is something that can be seen as passive, it is something that we're actually helping us to rewrite our thoughts about how we view the world. It helps us to rewrite how we think about certain things. So I do, or we do think it's important to talk about so that we can be critical and look at it from a lens as African people to see if it is a representation of what we think and what we feel. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to let each panelist introduce themselves. And as they introduce themselves, they're going to talk about the different perspective that they're taking or how they're looking at the film based on their background.
Yeah, so first we have my good brother Adisa Ajamu, who's gonna start us off, introduce his lens or lenses, and give some initial perspectives from his lens on the movie.
And thank you, Ayator. First, thank you all for pulling this together, as I said earlier, and for inviting me to be a part of the conversation. I like the way we're doing it this way. I hate long introduction made me uncomfortable, right? Because like okay, this is not a eulogy, like just So by training, I'm a developmental psychologist and an epidemiologist. So, but the lens I look at the world is as a scientist, as an African scientist, right? So my professional affiliation is as a developmental psychologist. I'm the I have faculty appointments in 5 different schools. It's not that important. What's most important is that I'm the founding director of the Center for Black Cultures, Resources, and Research at the University of California, Irvine, which is a research and cultural center and student support center. It might be, it's definitely the only one of its kind in California and probably on the west side of the country that combines both the providing capacity for services for students, a model for research and development, and takes as its whole lens African cultures, right? So the goal is to really have each culture have its own sense of agency and integrity and offer its particular knowledges and worldviews into the frame in terms of how we try to move African people forward. And also an executive director for the Tunwa Collective, which is a community development think tank that's now in its 15th year. So for me, I look at every movie first as like how I want to enjoy it, and then the next part of it is I'm interested in the people who are watching the movie, right? So I'm watching the movie first, and then I'm watching how our people are responding to the movie, right? So part of maybe that's part of the psychology because I'm interested in how we are experiencing. I'm interested in what we are taking away from it. I'm interested in also what we're not taking away from it. And I'm also very much aware of the fact that in psychology, there's a thing called an apperceptive field. So an apperceptive field, so in your environment, at any given time, there's about 1 billion stimuli, but the brain can't attend to all that stimuli. So what it does is, if it did, if your brain tried to attend to all the stimuli that's around you, your brain would do the same thing your computer does when you give it too many commands at once, and that technicolor circle shows up and starts. So what the brain does is it organizes information into themes, right? So let's say I decide I want to buy a Range Rover. Now all of a sudden I'm seeing Range Rovers everywhere, and I'm like, yo, that's God telling me, I'm supposed to get a Range Rover. And it may be, I can't speak for everybody, but more than likely what has happened is your brain has organized that into a theme that it puts at the forefront of your consciousness. And so when we've done experiments on this, like experiments in social psychology, we ask the students to say, okay, well, pick the car that you like and tell us how many times you saw that car during the course of the day. So the person come back and say, I saw this car 25 times. They say, okay, well, tell me another car you saw during the course of the day, and they can't tell you, right? Because they have selectively focused in, and it works in a number of ways. It works in terms of how, when we think about immigrant communities, most of the time we think about as Latin folks, right? We don't think about the Central Europeans. We don't think about the Africans. We don't think about the Haitians. It's because we've been programmed to create a certain kind of thematic perception, right? In the same way that when we think about Black people as being criminals, so on and so forth. So when you encounter a white person, they don't see you, they see the images that they have organized in their head. And so when you think about a movie, everybody comes to a movie with a certain lens, right? They come prepared to see what they came prepared to see. And the challenge is always to try and get people to broaden their lens, right? So a lot of times you'll have these debates on, about what the movie's actually about or not about, because each person is taking their lens not as a lens, but as the lens. And what ends up happening is you don't allow for the space for multiple lenses to also provide a broader picture, but also to invite illumination into the frame. So if you're a musicologist, right, you're paying attention to the blues and make sure is that historically accurate. If you did work in the Jim Crow South or Civil Rights movement, you're paying attention to that. If you're from Mississippi, right, like the last time I saw where people were like, yo, if you ain't from Mississippi, you don't need to be speaking up on it. Like, I mean, look, everybody from Mississippi, basically. You know what I'm saying? At some point, everybody from the South, right? So everybody's looking at it from these particular lenses. And for me, I'm interested in us because I'm interested in, in our communities, art has both form and function. Like the idea of art for art's sake is not that's somebody else's thing. That's not our thing, right? So I'm looking at what the art is saying to us, but also what we are saying to the art, because that's also telling us a lot about what our folks are thinking, what they're missing, what they're not seeing, so on and so forth. Some people describe the movie as a horror film. I see it as a film of spiritual realism, right? So like sort of play on like the Latin America had this fiction movement called Magical Realism by in part by Gabriel Garcia Marquez and 100 Years of Solitude. But when I read that, I didn't think that was magical realism because I moved through a world where the spirit world is very much a part of the actual world, right? So to me, as I looked at the movie, I saw this as a treatise, whether Ryan Coogler intended that or not, a treatise on the challenge that you have, the tension between the sacred and the profane, the tension between the physical and the metaphysical, the ways in which the Ma'afa has disrupted so a natural synergism for Black folks. So that basically we try to have a moment that's a spiritual moment that's a secular moment. When really, when you look in the juke joint, it's all happening at once, right? Like these things kind of converge, but again, because we don't have a framework for it, we have to segment. So we separate the church, the opening montage with the church from the juke joint. When both of them are actually moments of spiritual manifestation, and they're existing in the context of oppression or oppressive situation, or as Baba Naim would say, oppression is an unnatural phenomena which produces in people who respond to it unnatural responses, right? So part of this is also about looking at not just how are people responding, but why they have to respond the way that they have to respond. But why they have to move the way that they move. And then I'm concerned about, like, okay, well, look, anytime you are not in control of the final product, in a sense. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what would Ryan have said if he had been free to say everything he wanted to say, right? So that's also part of the enterprise, right? Because if somebody's saying in 25 years you get your thing back, it means that for up until 25 years they own it. You know what I'm saying? Like they own it, and they get to make the decision. So I'm also looking at that in the sense like, okay, well, what can he get in? What is he missing? And then lastly, I would say that a big part of the African Center movement and it's in Black psychology was around understanding the importance and role of symbolism and understanding African American culture. And our inability to understand the symbolisms, which get in the way of us being able to translate our phenomena. So a couple of things that really kind of stuck with me was the Choctaw at the beginning, right? Like the indigenous folks that we see at the beginning, they're trackers, right? Like that means, in other words, like that's what they do. They used to as when they're chasing the vampire in the opening scene, this is something they're skilled at. Like this is not they're not like moving like the folks in the juke joint, which they're responding to assault. They're on the offensive, right? They're not the ones on the defense. They're on the offensive. And I was like, so I'm like, well, why didn't they show up again? Because that's like, that I thought that was a very telling moment that we could have benefited from. And then the other thing was I wrote about this in a post on Facebook that the framing of the protagonist actually misses the point. The most important person in the juke joint is Annie. Is not Preacher Boy. It's Annie, the person who understands how that other world works, right? Understands the spiritual dimensions and stuff. Remember, Preacher Boy is not relevant until the vampires actually show interest in it because he can play music. It's Annie that when we meet Annie, there's a little girl coming to her to get some medicine. She's talking to, I think, a Smoke, right? About the omelet that she's kept used to keep him alive, so on and so forth. But as the story progresses, Preacher Boy becomes the person that they got to protect at all costs, not this person who actually is in the best position. She stay alive to make sure everybody else gets to be alive. And so I wonder how much of that is both a framing that works well within Hollywood conventions and not necessarily a framing that would make sense for those of us who actually exist within African spiritual traditions, and actually do work in our communities around how we merge science and spirit and get the work done. Because everywhere I am, everywhere I've been, whether it's the West End of Atlanta, whether it's Southeast DC, whether it's the South Bronx, it's the sisters. It's the sisters that's like so to me, it seemed like that part of it was kind of like a concession to Hollywood. So
And
for me,
I think that's like a really good segue to Day Bombay when you're talking about the spirituality. And Day Bombay, would you want to give yourself a little like Bob, because he handed it over to you when he started talking about the spirituality piece.
Okay, Alafi everyone. My name is Adebambe Kemet, also known as Professor Arthur Amaker at the college level. I am looking at this. I saw the movie one time, and I looked at it from the perspective of an African American studies professor, as well as someone who has been studying for the past few years in the traditional Yoruba system of Ifa. So I want to discuss it from that angle, and then also maybe discuss later on the literature aspects of it. But I thought it was interesting that this is one of the few films that Hollywood has produced in recent memory where the idea of the mythology around the blues and hoodoo are explored somewhat.
Mm.
There was a previous film that came out in the 80s, if you remember, called Crossroads, directed by Walter Hill, featuring Ralph Macchio. And in that particular movie in the 1980s, it explores the idea of the very famous blues mythology of Robert, the figure or the Orisha called Eshu or Ilegba is, and there's some very political reasons behind that that go into the history. I don't want to get the history now, but we all know that Eshu is not Satan. And then, matter of fact, Eshu is the one that really holds the direct replica of the power of God, which we call Oludumare, right? But in that movie, Crossroads, in order for Ralph Macchio's character to win a cutting contest at the end of the movie, he and the black man who introduces him to Legba, he has to kind of make a pact to do this, right? So fast forward to Sinners, there's a pact that's also made, I guess, by the character of Sammy with the vampires that lead to his celebrity. And the character of Annie, like Baba Adisha had mentioned, is the gateway into hoodoo folklore, although at a very light level. There's a scene, of course, where Stack and Annie are reminiscing over their lost child, and they show um, the kind of the implements and the glass implements and objects that are very common in old school Southern Gullah Geechee type of graveyards. Matter of fact, there's a lot of historians and anthropologists that have done research on the uniqueness of Southern graveyards, especially Black Southern graveyards, and how it ties to African spirituality. So Kugler threw that in there. He also threw the whole idea of doing a pact with something to reach power. And even the idea of the vampires, which come about from the Irish. I was listening to an interview that Kugler did, that he actually did research on the history of vampires, and that Bram Stoker, the one who wrote Dracula, actually was Irish and had based some of that mythology of the vampire not on Eastern Europeans, of Vlad the Impaler, but rather on an old Irish myth, which I believe was pronounced Arabak. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but it's a Celtic myth of kind of a blood-sucking vampire. So it's interesting that Kugler said he intentionally had them be Irish because of that. And that relates in some ways because when we look at the hoodoo system of the South, see it as a unique spiritual system of African Americans in the South. That particular system is a mixture of West African, Native American, and also you have some Celtic, Scots-Irish elements in there as well. So I think that Kugler, in his roundabout way, was kind of giving a tribute to that and the whole mixture of what it means to be Southern culture. Even with the blues itself, Charlie Patton, which is mentioned in the movie, Charlie Patton was said to be a full-blooded Choctaw or Native American. They don't explore that in the film, but they mention him. But there are Native Americans who say that actually there is also a root of Native American culture in the blues. So that was also interesting. So he was dealing with a lot of stuff and put a lot of stuff in there that if you take the time to really kind of see, it makes sense. Now, however, it would not be good for someone who has no idea of these things. And I think if they're looking just for a straight ahead horror movie or a straight ahead movie on the blues, it's not that. You know, Sinners has a lot of stuff in it that's really beyond genre. And at times for me, it was kind of jarring. I was trying to figure out where it was going on certain levels. given that you did have certain films in the past, one of the people in the chat mentioned Angel Heart, for example. Angel Heart, which is a film that more from a white perspective, but dealt with Louisiana voodoo from more kind of a scary kind of thing. The South alone is a very rich tapestry of mysticism and spirituality that really could stand alone as a film. But Coogler tried to do a lot of other things, which I think would be jarring for someone who doesn't really have that kind of background with those type of things. Right. So those are the things. I probably the most powerful thing that you definitely get from the movie, and it showed that visually in that one sequence, is the power of music to really open up other worlds, which is very common, and even to a point where the whole juke joint scene where Sammy's playing and he opens up the doorway of the past, present, and future of Black music all in one sequence, and everyone's kind of having this kind of trance type of state. That was also very African, and I think that was a good way to kind of incorporate that and show that. But I think it may have gone over some people's heads if they didn't catch that. But he did mention at the very beginning of the movie, there was a quote that talked about the power of the griot and what the griot can do in terms of putting together worlds and being a bridge between worlds, which, as you know, which is often done when we pray or when we give libation, when we do ritual, when we chant, when we sing. Those things open up that portal. And he was showing that visually, right? So those are some initial thoughts I have, which I thought was an interesting film.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Sage,
So
you want to jump in?
Sure. Greetings, everyone. My name is Sage Crump, also Buseje Osset. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. I bring you greetings, though, today from Indianapolis and from the National Black Radical Organizing Conference. Folks are really excited we're having this conversation while they're over at the conference, still meeting right now. I was laughing a bit to myself, Nozidele, when you said some folks are asking, why are we talking about this movie? And I was like, oh, those are folks who don't understand the relationship between culture and revolution. Right? Like, if you're asking why we're talking about this, we're missing like the tools that we have at our disposal, the cultural tools that we have at our disposal for political education, for political alignment, for grounding, for historical context, for the struggles that we are currently in. I am a cultural strategist, movement historian and facilitator, and a working artist. And so I'm going to approach this from a couple of different lenses. I'm also a Black queer socialist and feminist. So we're going to get into some of the economy about all of this, folks. It's going to be an interesting, but I really appreciate Brother Adisa, you starting us off and around who Annie is and sort of the context of the power of the feminine in this film. It is historic in Ryan Coogler's work around the upliftment of Black women and their role in the community and how they keep us safe. Brother Ade Bombay, bringing us into sort of African spirituality, one of the conversations I was having with one of my elders is the way the twins represent Abeyi, the twins, and we can take that into the concept of our dual consciousness as Black people, right? Like how do we hold that? Who is Stack? Who is Smoke? Who is Elijah? And who is Isaiah? Which are their given names, right? So you also see a lot of play around what they're called by whom throughout the film and what that means about how they're showing up in the space. This is sort of the opening remarks. So I'm going to try not to get into the weeds of too many things so that we can actually be in conversation. I think that there are like 5 different entryways into this film for me. As someone who has made her political and spiritual home in the U.S. South, and has been to Clarksdale many times and worked with blues musicians, both historically and both historical elders and a new generation of blues musicians that we are currently, shout out to Sister Tafara Waller Muhammad, who is working with blues musicians around economy, like to this day, that is her body of work. There's a lot inside this film that we can talk about. from the relationship to Clarksdale, Mississippi, and plantation economies that show up, there are things that are really significant in this film that slide by very, very easily. For instance, the fact that the brothers bought a mill, and that the mill, which is the site of economic extraction, turns out in this film to become the place of Black joy, right? We can talk about it from that perspective. We can talk about there's a lot in the content of it around the blues and music and the fear of the theft of our cultural production and our stories. But there's also inside this film clear conversation to be had around the theft of Black labor, and what that meant. And that shows up in terms of the plantation economy, in the scene where people are using different types of currency. It shows up in the scene where they're driving down the road. Well, actually, I just need to say ahead of time, because Ade Bombay, I was like, if you haven't seen the film, spoilers are going to happen. So sorry, folks. Can't talk about it without spoiling things. If you haven't seen it, you're going to hear a lot about it. There are, and thank you for coming, even if you haven't seen it. So there are scenes where they're driving down the road and you're looking at a chain gang, right? Like, and they're working the land. There's the relationship to meeting your cotton quota, and again, stolen Black labor that keeps folks indentured and in a form of enslavement. There's conversations about to be had around the seductive nature of capital, right? Like that one of the things that creates the rift between the twins is the relationship to what is real money and what isn't real money, what you can take and what you can't take and what you can use, and how that translates into power. And so I think that is worth, I'm doing the like high level, folks, and hopefully we'll get into more detail. I think that there's the fact that the brothers are buying land, we are on the 100th anniversary of Malcolm X's birthday, right? Like, and I was talking with some folks today about, the quote, where Brother Malcolm is talking about all revolution is based on land, right? And when the brothers are buying it, they're very specific. When they're buying the mill, they're very specific. They're like, we want the mill, the building, all of the acres of land and everything inside it. And if you cross our land boundary, you're gonna get some of this, right? Like, so there's a real intention around land in this film, around Black land, the Black self-determination on their own land. And then we can get into this, if anyone wants to go down the road of the brilliance of the filmmaking of this, we can do that too, right? Like there's a, as a Black horror film and Black horror as a genre, we know that for when we make Black horror films, we have devices such as like vampires and monsters and white terror. We have all these things that are sort of analogous to the way white terror lays on our bodies and impacts how we get to move through the world. And in this particular film, like I was thinking about other films in sort of the Black horror genre. And one of the things I love about Sinners that's different than some other films that would be alongside it in sort of the pantheon of Black horror, like Get Out, is that you leave Get Out talking about white people, you leave Sinners talking about Black people, right? It's a real interesting difference in what the conversation that the film is bringing up, right? Like, and I so appreciate that. An elder asked me today, who hadn't seen it, what is this film about? And I was sitting with it for a second because we could talk about it from so many different places. And I was like, oh, I think at its core, this film is about Black self-determination in the face of white terror and the colonial project of racial imperial capitalism. Like it hits on both of those in every character, right? Whether it be Remnick, and we started talking a little bit, I saw in the chat, the Irish and what it meant to become white and what you had to give up in terms of the colonial project to become a part of this. You can look at it in the face of terror and the Klan and what it meant to try and be self-determined. The Klan was already coming even before the vampires knew that they wanted to be there, right? Like there are things that that are already horrific in the history and the space and the social arrangements of the place. before we even get to the gore of it, right? Like the horror of it. You can talk in this film about there's a device in filmmaking called the heroic object, right? Like, and it's like there's a particular object in the film that helps the story move along its path. And in Sinners, it's the guitar. And so you can talk about the way the guitar is used both like to talk about parenting and the relationship between Sammy and his dad, right? Like when he goes to look for his guitar and his dad has taken it because he needs him to come talk to him. You can talk about the guitar in the scene that Brother Adebambe was just talking about, where Sammy is playing um, the song "I Lied to You," and even if you look at the lyrics of the song "I Lied to You," it is a song about self-determination and like how I'm trying to get free. But the guitar is the instrument by which Sammy is expressing and creating this content. And then it is also the tool by which he kills Remnant, right? So you can see the use of the guitar as a heroic object, as a thing that is both representative, but is also a tool that tells so much of the story in the way it is moved and used. And then historically, I mean, I just want to encourage, if you haven't read Development Arrested and Plantation Economy in the Blues by Clyde Woods, it's a brilliant take on the Mississippi Delta and why that is the birthplace of blues, and that's part of the beauty of Delroy Lindo and his character. Gives you a sense like why that particular part of this land birthed such a deep, moving political sound, right? Like what it from the core, from a soul place, right? Um, and then there's a lot in this film around race solidarity or not, and the intermingling and the way economics also created the intermingling of both white people, Black people, and Chinese people. And if you spend some time in the Delta, you spend some time in Alabama, some of us remember it in the West End in Atlanta, you know that there's an Asian element that has always been in the South. And so it was interesting to see that uplifted and how Ryan Coogler did that. So I'm going to stop there because I see you on the top.
Oh my God. That was a different movie than I saw. Thank you. See, that's why we need things like this so that we can have these conversations and we can unpack all of these things. Because I know for me, I was hyper focused on the spiritual aspect and I could not get past that part. But I think it's good for us to have those types of things. So at this point, we'll let you all get into your conversations, the three of you.
So actually, Nosy Bile, I think we had intended on having another sister here, Sister Nzinga, but somehow we didn't connect. But if you don't mind, if you can share your lens and maybe give a couple of points from your perspective as well, and then we can maybe go back, maybe take some questions from the audience or have some people expound on some of what they mentioned. But if you don't mind.
I don't mind, but after that, I was just like, "Dag, I got to sit with that for a while and think about it." Because as I said before, I was looking at the movie from not only as a lens, as an anthropologist, someone who studies traditional African religion, someone who studies religion in the South, someone who studies the blues and all those types of things. But I'm also an initiated voodoo priestess. And I have been for the past, I want to say 20 something plus years, right? And I know when I looked at the movie, because African traditional religion has been so demonized, it's been so denigrated, that I was hoping that it would have been more of a clear-cut path to talk about how African religion can liberate us. I was hoping that I would see how African religion can protect us. And I was looking for how African religion could really basically help us fight off this guilt of, like J said, how to free us from the colonial project, right? But I didn't see any of that, right? I saw, even though it seems as Coogler was really thoughtful with other aspects of the film, I do think from the lens that I'm looking at or looking through, that he didn't take that same amount of care and diligence with African religion and tradition. And I dare say that in his representation of blues as demonic, I don't see that he ever walked back from that, right? So there's always an association. If we talking about scholars, we could talk about Angela Davis when she did her book about what was it, Bessie, Gertrude, and Billy, when she talked about the three blues greats. She talked a lot about how blues was demonized and how at one point blues was something that was liberating for African people. Blues was a way for them to express themselves. And then as the white Christian hegemony started to become more popular and started to become more mainstream, that they had to make blues something that was counter to Christianity. So they had to demonize the blues. And in that movie, I saw some demonization of the blues that he never walked back from. I also saw some of the trivialization of African religion. And we could talk about Ade Bombay, the way that divination was done, you know, how with the divination, it was still powerless. And even so, some of the symbolism that they had for African religion and African people was outright wrong, right? So those are some of the things that made me concerned about the movie, and that's one of the, why I was like, okay, it's something for us to talk about, because I really do think it's important for us to represent African religion in a good way.
Yeah. If I could so this is my thesis here, that how the film began predisposed folks to miss most of the Africanity in the movie. When the movie starts out, it starts out with men in the beginning had the little montage talking about the griot and the importance of the griot as a storyteller, right? Well, the first problem with that is that's not the name. Griot is a French word that is a creolization of the Portuguese word for servant. The proper word is gele, which means blood. If you start out with that, it takes you someplace different, because the function of blood is to move through the social body, to remove impurities, and to oxygenate the cells. So it completely reorders the whole way you see the film. If you understand that geles are not just storytellers, they also diplomats, they're also healers, they're also doulas, then you can step into the film and see that Annie is also a gele. She's also part of the social blood. Then you understand why the vampires play a role, because what do vampires want? They want the same thing white folks want, the blood. They want the blood of black folks. And if you understand that, then you understand why it's not blues, it's music. In our traditions, our spiritual systems, it opens the portal. But why? Because music is what gets the blood flowing, right? So the very first music we hear is the heartbeat. When you're in your mother's body, you hear the heartbeat. So it's that sound that lets you know that the blood is moving through the circle, right? Because you still got to ask the question: African people been doing hoodoo long before we discovered the blues. So what other music were they using before that, right? Like what happens is it sets up a dynamic where you have to think about black folks in the context of their oppression and not in the context of them being liberated, and that their oppression is constraining the possibilities. Because once you accept the premise of the griot, you are now in somebody else's narrative. I think Confucius says that the key to wisdom is getting the names of things correct, right? So when people say our name incorrect, we always correct them, right? Because like, I don't know who this is, but that's not my name, right? So part of this is also that so it sets up a dynamic in which it takes us someplace different, right? Because if Annie sees a jelly and we understand it's blood, then maybe she doesn't end up being killed, right? Maybe they reorders the way that they do that. So for me, as a person, is look at how you can shape a film to send folks in one direction versus others. So it's not that I think everybody has made really great points, stuff that I have to go back and rethink. But I just wonder, if we had started from an African perspective, where does that take us?
I appreciate that. Oh wait, are we raising hands? I don't. Because I saw Dave's hand as I started to speak.
Okay, Dave Bombay or
Then the
Arturo, you go
presenters
first.
can just jump in and the audience can raise their
I
hand.
want Buseje. I'll shoot. Let Buseje say everything else.
I was just gonna say, I appreciate this conversation. I'm laughing, Nosy Betty, because I want to be like, did we see the same movie? Now I feel the same way, right? But I am not initiated in anything, so it's really interesting to hear that from you, from sort of a layperson's perspective. There's certain things, certain ways in which Ryan Coogler used certain places that I thought was interesting around spirituality, like the way in which doorways are used, right? Like, and there's something really, I appreciate the brilliance of like using vampires as a way, sort of an entryway to talk about what doorways mean spiritually, right? All of the very like tense moments, or like the activating pivotal moments of the film happen in doorways, through doors, and we know, like, who has to cross your door. We know what doorways mean to us in so many ways. Who crosses your doorway in the beginning of the year? Don't sweep. Where do you put your pennies? Like all the ways in which like we understand the spiritual significance of doorways as a place to pass through, and what is allowed and what is not allowed. I thought was really a way in which he incorporated through the lens of sort of the vampire lore, Black spiritual tradition, right? Like I thought it was really interesting. So I just want to say.
Interesting. I think Cougar, I don't think is initiated into anything, but I do think that it's a step in the right direction. There is a danger sometimes with those of us as academics in this thing to impose what we would like when someone doesn't have that same orientation. I don't think Kugler's approaching this as an African spiritualist or traditionalist. I think though that his heart's in the right place. Yes, there were things that were done spirituality, right? But at the same time, the fact that it's opening a conversation, just like Black Panther did. Black Panther opened up a conversation about Afrofuturism, opened up a conversation about kingdoms and royalty. And that was a positive thing that direction. But it's interesting though, Baba Adisha, that you said that Jali do what Kemet and I said. It's like names are important and symbols are important. And that changes the whole meaning, right? Just to say historian compared to a bloodline, right? And I think we do ourselves a disservice, like Sister Nozambili said, when we don't do deeper research to really see the profundity of our traditions. So even the whole idea of, once again, equating selling your soul to the devil is this, where there's no such thing as a devil in most African spiritual systems. There are several different negative forces that could come on somebody. We call them Elenini, of course, in Yoruba. They have Ajogun, these type of things. So when people ask me, is there a devil? No, there's actually multitude of things that could be evil. But yeah, I think that he was trying to put something together in a way. It seemed like he had a lot of different ideas that he was working with. And sometimes it kind of was mumbled or muffled to me, but I think that the intent was pure, which is what I appreciated, right? I tried to not get into my whole, because I am, trained also as a creative writer, right? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I wanted more characterization, I wanted more background. They were dropping all these things with Smoke and Stack. Okay, their father got killed. They helped kill the. Okay, what's that? You just drop these things and leave that there? Like, give me some more. What's going on with that? The whole thing with Annie and and Smoke, or Stack rather, I get them confused, right? Talking about their child. Okay, Give me some background on that. What's going on in Chicago? There's a lot of things that were just thrown out there. And then even how the vampires come in, like, where did they come from?
Right, right.
That came out the blue for me, right? I mean, I wanted some more back. I mean, he could have really have gotten into the whole depth of the Choctaw, who had almost like a cameo in there.
Right.
They could have been, hunting the vampire. And what's their mythology about vampires? Now, there's a lot of things that it seemed like he was doing a lot of research and a lot of things on a surface level and giving us a lot of surface stuff, right? But the intent was good, which I applaud, which is why I supported the film, and I encourage folks to see it if they haven't seen it yet. But definitely, as an African spiritualist, and we just have to make our own movies if we want something that's like we need more like a Hollywood Jarima type people, or even Daughters of the Dust had more about who do see in this film. So but we need to make those type of movies. We need to get together and make those type of, we can't expect someone who really has no idea yet. I mean, he's moving in that direction,
So I agree. What I would say is that, like, part of our job is also to add layers of understanding to an audience, right? Like, so because films and novels only can do so much, and then part of our work is also in our community to also contextualize some of this work. For me, the question here is one, I'm interested in making sure that people understand that JLA is a proper term, and that why white folk have gravitated towards griot as storytellers, because that's what they see us historically, as entertainers, not as thinkers, right? So it fits very well within the narrative of how white folks view Black people, right? So it's comfortable to have a storyteller, right? That's like almost like a court gesture. But to have somebody actually who is skilled in certain arts is something that gets lost in translation. So what I was saying, I don't think that, one, I think if you put that in the movie that way, he has to tell us a different kind of story. And I believe that filmmakers should tell the story they want to tell. My interest is in making sure that our community understands, okay, here's what the proper term is, so that you can add that corrective to the process. The other thing I would say is that, much like when Spike Lee came out, and I equate Ryan to Spike Lee in this sense. You remember when Spike Lee first came on the scene, like, all his movies were like cultural events. Like, if Spike Lee joint was coming out, you was definitely gonna be there. You remember that? So, and Ryan is becoming that person. And it was also a point at which once we had seen enough of Spike Lee's films, we started to recognize, okay, because every artist, your unconscious shows up in your art eventually. We like, hey, Spike Lee got some problems with sisters, particularly light-skinned sisters, right? That was a whole part of discourse. When you look at Ryan Coogler's work, he has a problem with one, all the films have white folks in spaces they shouldn't be in. The other thing is he had a hard time, like we don't, in the Black Panther, we don't see Black Panther kill don't kill nobody, right? Like he doesn't get to kill the white person, right? Like that's intentional, and that's a thread that runs through this. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, what as you're telling a story, right? How much of that is a function of just your own unconscious, and how much that's a function of the constraints placed on you by the industry, so on and so forth. And I think that where we can provide a valuable service is that we can help illuminate. For example, we know that majority of Africans who escaped from plantations in Mississippi, they established maroon societies. But it's a Choctaw that understood the land, that showed them where the swamps were at and how to navigate them. Right, that's important. Like, so we see the Choctaw. They not just they have an integral role in part of our liberation struggle. And him introducing it also then gives us an opportunity to also talk about that. Like, say, here, this is what the relationship was between those folks, and so on and so forth. So those things, I think when you look at the art overall, I like the movie. I took 200 students to see the movie. I thought it was a great way to introduce folks to certain elements. And then it's our job as people interested, sort of illuminate that conversation.
And I want to build on that a little bit more, because I do agree that people's subconscious show up. For me, in addition to what you said, Adisa, it seems as if Ryan Coogler has a problem with Mexicans and indigenous people, because my whole issue with Black Panther was that you had the people of color fighting each other and not who they really wanted or who they really needed to fight. So I'm not saying that, I want people to actually put a real Yoruba ritual on screen, right? People don't need to see that. They don't need to see what a real Yoruba shrine looks like, right? But they do need to see that African tradition and African divination is a science. It's not mystical. It's not hokey pokey, and it's not like you can take a button and a door handle and cast it and not get any information. Right. To me, that was very problematic because it never talks about the strength and the resilience or the power that is in African tradition. Right. Most of the things that he talked about, you know, you look at where the power is. And another thing, like you say, you never saw white people get killed on screen. In Sinners, you saw Black people get killed in horrific ways. White people get killed off screen. We don't see any white people, unless you all can help me remember. I don't remember seeing any white people getting killed on screen.
And he probably
But Black
that
people are
$90 million
attacking
budget if he did that.
Well, Remnick gets killed
You
on
want to get that
screen.
$90 million budget.
Remnick gets
Who
killed
I
on
gets
could have
killed?
screen.
sworn that happened to Get Out.
Yeah, and we saw
Oh,
that.
Get Out.
We saw Remnick get killed on screen.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that,
Who-
yeah, the
who is
mill owner
that?
gets killed on screen, the Klan gets killed on
Oh, no,
screen.
no, I'm talking about the vampires. Of course, we see the big payoff with the white people that get killed at the end, but I'm talking about vampires, unless that.
And I want to slide in here because I think there's something interesting about this conversation that I'm wrestling with. A couple of years ago, Barbara Smith, who is one of the authors of the Combahee River Collective, Black feminist icon, just amazing. She said, you know, one of the challenges in this time is we've kept the identity and forgot the politic. Right. And so we personify everything. We make it about the person, right? Like, and Ade Bombay, I keep shortening your name. You had me start to think about this in terms of this like idea of the devil, right? That's a personification of a system, right? Like, and I think there's a political conversation that Ryan Coogler is trying to have with this film that is about
Please, AJ, we can't.
You can't hear me?
I can hear me. I can hear you.
Yeah, there's a conversation that that Ryan Coogler is trying to have through the characters, right? Like that is really interesting to me. For instance, there's something like it gets juicy and complex, right? Because part of what there's a conversation about the sort of vampire community trying to build beloved community, right? Like that's how they're talking about it, right? They're like turning you so you can, it's a gift I'm trying to give you. It's why Mary runs away, you know, and so upset when Annie dies, right? They're trying to be together in a certain way. In the same time, you're having a whole conversation about, and at some point we got to talk about cornbread because cornbread's my favorite, right? In terms of who personifies what in this film. That there's a whole conversation about like how do we get to beloved community? What do you have to negotiate? What do you have to give up to be able to be a part of something and have a sense of belonging and have a power in this, particularly in this film, in the United States in 1930, right? Like what do you have to sell? What do you have to give up in order to have a certain level of power, a certain agency, self-possession, right? Like, and in this film, he's using what it means to be a vampire and to be turned as part of that, right? Like that's what they're looking for as a working class utopianism. Yeah, absolutely. Like it's a this is gonna sound really wild, right? Like it's a horror version of what Chairman Fred was talking about, right? Around class consciousness, around how we create across racial lines, like what is the thing that actually holds us together, right? It holds folks together in struggle. And in this film, there is, as I started, you know, again, I look at a lot of things through the lens of economy, right? Like, and that it is that sort of what it means to be poor, that and trying to be powerful, that is what turns that folks turn towards, right? Like it turned towards the that makes the becoming a vampire, it allows you access to power in a different way that you did not have as a poor Black body, as a poor Black person, right? And I think that's an interesting thing for us to unpack as we think about revolutionary movements in this context, right? Around who do we find solidarity for and why? And what do we see as alignment, you know? And I think about what you were saying around Black Panther, Nozibele, for me is, again, I look at that as Black people fighting each other. I also look at that as a conversation about how the internal struggles of movement, right? Like, and when do we get to talk about that, right? Like what actually shows us when we need to have, and now granted, we could have that conversation about maybe that didn't need to be in a film made by Marvel. But it is a conversation we need to have about the way our movements implode through internal factions, right? Like that's a valuable conversation for us to have as we're on this revolutionary road, right? Like, so I think that there's something around him as a filmmaker and what he offers us around political strategy and things like that this film and his arc of filmmaking can offer us, right?
So I wanted to talk about something I thought that not a lot of folks comment on, which is the use of intimacy in the film, right? And the way that it shows up in a variety of different ways in that particular context. Like most of the time we see stories told in the Jim Crow South, it's mostly fear and support, in terms of like protection from the fear. But here you see Smoke and Stack, they hug each other, say, I love you, take care of yourself. And there's all these little moments of just intimacy, right? Like, there's a moment where Stack is talking to Mary saying, look, hey, I know I couldn't be with you because you look like you're white. So I had to do what I need to do to make sure I protect myself and also put you someplace safe. He tells, there's a conversation with him and Preacher Boy, you need to take your work to that nice community over there. So it's all of these moments here where there's a kind of there's obviously sensuality, but the intimacy part is missed because you usually don't see that. You don't usually see people. It's usually around expressing support after some tragedy has happened. Not just like in the everyday talking, like they going to, I love you, man. Da da da. It was a very real. There's all these moments of intimacy, and for me, this is gonna sound controversial. The vampires are the least interesting part of the movie. Like every time the vampires show up, all the interesting stuff stops. Like every time you get into like every time the vampires show up, like man, look, give me some better vampires or lead them out, right? Because part of what makes a movie like that work is the villain has to have the kind of power that makes the heroes have to rise to another level. I'm looking at Remick. I'm like, I think I could take Remick. You know what I'm saying? I'm 5. I think I can take Remick. I'm not scared, right? So I thought that there was a part of that where like every time the vampire showed up, the vampire was supposed to heighten the action. It was like, man, come on, I want to stay in the juke joint. I want to stay with these people, and now I gotta go over here and deal with this foolishness. So I want to sort of say, Sanjay, what you said about the political economy, because I think that for most of the time we talk about political economy, we leave out the fact that identity formation is critical to how you function within the political economy. If you don't have a concept of who you are, it's hard for you to have solidarity because you can't really figure out what are you advocating for. For example, in behavioral economics, they have a thing called path dependence. Path dependence is when somebody keeps doing something, even though they know it doesn't work, but they keep doing it because they've always done it. It's more convenient to do it, right? So you'll know, like, so for you, somebody reach out their hand to shake hands in the business setting, and you don't know ordinarily shake hands, but you do it anyway because it's easy to shake the hand than to explain why you don't shake the hand. And I think that a lot of how we participate in these discourses around political economy and about coalition building it's locked into a path dependence that has not worked for us. And the only way you break path dependence is you got to start thinking about those relationships differently and think about yourself differently. And my concern is always that we bring the same mindset to the problem and expect the problem to change. At some point we got to think differently about the problem if we want to actually change how we approach the problem.
I think it's interesting that we're talking about economics because when you look at vampires, vampires have always been coded to represent wealth and prosperity, old money, old European people money, and all that other type of stuff, right? And so each monster is representative for something else. So I think that by using the vampire as, a larger meaning, like a larger picture of everything that's going on was really interesting. But I wanted to kind of like touch back a little bit about what you said, Buseje, about the vampire making the perfect community. When you think about it, and if you can help me refresh my mind a little bit, how much of the attacks were consensual? How many people gave consent to be a vampire. I don't know, and I don't remember anyone saying, "Oh yeah, bite me. I want to be a part of your vampire family," as opposed to, again, white people coming in and colonizing Black bodies in a very violent way. I'm going to bite you and make you a part of this vampire family, and we're going to be whimsical dancers, whether you like it or not. So, was there any talk about, is this something that you want?
I think I appreciate that because I came out, I was doing a session here at the conference earlier with some folks on Organizing 101. And we were talking about the difference with folks between the objectives, the strategies, and the tactics, right? So the objective is one thing, right? The objective is they talk about like, how do we create this community? Like, I don't want to be alone. I want to be with my people is a literal line in there, right? Like, but the strategy now is what you're talking about, right? Like how you go about it, like what you did to make it happen, maybe not so much because nobody agreed to it, right? Like, and that's the thing we see all the time in terms of our relationship to racial imperial capitalism, right? Like the objective is one thing, right? The objective is to live a good life, to care for your children, but the strategy, can be all kinds of wild things that destroy the planet. And so I think very similarly, what you're talking about mirrors in the film, mirrors the way these systems work on our bodies in real time and in real life.
So smart.
Let me just do a quick advertisement. So, welcome everybody. This is the series KMTspeaks, where we have bold and interesting dialogue centered around all the many facets of our people. We have Sister Sage, Brother Adisa, Brother Ade Bombay, and Sister Nosy Bile, and myself, Ayatoro. So we have our presenters giving multiple perspectives from many facets. I dropped a link in the chat if you're interested in being kept up with as far as our future programs. You can sign our mailing list with the link in the chat. But we work to do one of these conversations at least every couple of months just to keep everything going and everything flowing. Also, before I forget, Buseze, if you ever want to advertise yourself as someone who needs to be spoken to when you want to make a film, to make sure you cover all the pieces and that you don't leave anything out, you definitely can use this video as a promotional tool for yourself. It's definitely, you hit a lot of points like bam, 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 bam. If you're doing a film, you want it to look like this, you want it to look like that.
I got a lot of filmmakers around me. I got a lot of filmmakers.
Yes, I can tell. I can tell. So,
I
Nosy
know, man.
Bile, do you want to open the floor? There's a lot of people in the room. There are some comments in the chat, but definitely let's have an opportunity for some of our guests to ask some questions of our presenters. Can we do that?
Yeah, definitely. If you want to ask questions, please raise your hands and we will get to you, you know, as we see them. You can make a brief comment and make sure that, you kind of like keep your question, thank you, keep your question down to maybe like 2 minutes so that we have time to respond. Anyone have any? Oh, okay, Melvin, Gerald.
Greetings, everyone.
Greetings.
A lot of these people on this call are my family, so I just want to say hello to them. But at the start of this call, we talked about the lens that you look at this movie through, and I am a person who's in theater, and so I look through the lens of performances. So I just want to comment, and no question, just comment on the amazing performances that we saw in this movie. I mean, especially from Michael B. Jordan. I mean, Delroy Lindo, I mean, is a national treasure in terms of acting. And so I just want to comment on those performances to say that that really stirred a lot in me.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that. Yeah.
I mean,
Asante.
the performances are amazing in so many ways. Like I've gone back to Omar Miller again. Cornbread had me on the like. I'm so interested in like again Omar Miller and his work. Yeah, Mel, that's real talk.
One of the things that it's actually gonna be probably a Facebook post tomorrow, but one of the things that I wanted to pose was so in Black psychology, um, Dr. Joseph White put forth the notion of 7 psychological strengths of Black folks, right? So the first one is improvisation, obviously the ability to be resourceful, make a way out of no way. The second one is resilience, the ability to get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. Connectedness, spirituality, emotional vitality, gallows humor, and number 7 is a healthy distrust of white folks. And I would tell people, like, if you take those things and go look at the movie, you see those elements on display in the film, right? You see the improvisation, you see the resilience, you see the connectedness, you see the gallows humor, you see the healthy distrust of white folks. And for me, the reason why I bring that up is because I think anytime if you've seen a movie more than once, you should be asking us, okay, what can I take from this movie that's gonna help me improve my life, right? That's the other part. Like, so, because part of this is that we sometimes distance ourselves from it and just make it purely entertainment or a way to have a level of sort of like social political commentary. We should also say, look, are there some lessons here for me about things I could do differently in my life? Maybe, if I look at these psychological strengths, maybe I'm not as resilient as I could be, or maybe I need to work on my improvisation. Certainly, I can need to work on the question around connectedness. But for me, I think that part of the challenge, and this might be because I'm a psychologist, I think that we should always be having conversations, having conversations about why, time and time again, we quietly say that Black women are the backbone, but when it's time to actually show it fully, we don't have that same kind of energy, right? And it shows up in this film. It shows up in a lot of films. It's almost like we want to give brothers credit for acknowledging sisters, which is cool. But if you cook the whole meal, just simply acknowledging we thank you for the meal, as opposed to like we thank you for all the hard work that went in, all the sacrifice, da da da. So I think there's also a point here where like we can do better, right? I thought that the movie here missed a moment to do better in that regard, right? That it's not just because Annie's not just somebody she's the backbone of the community. Like everybody's coming to her for stuff. So the way in which she's positioned and the way in which the movie ends up is I understand every artist is free to have their interpretation, but here's what we're left with. So Annie dies, and then she reunited with her baby in heaven, and da da da. I think it's Stack. So Stack ended with Mary, and basically their life is the life of the living dead, right? They basically zombies, pretty much. So the choices we left with at the end of the film is that hey, you can either hope you get to heaven, or you could be a zombie. But there's nothing there that says like, okay, look, well, the majority of Black people survived, right? Like that there's a message there about like not only just the majority of Black people survived, but at the end of it, there's a Black woman that's standing. And for me, that's an important message because young people watching that film, and they are both always overt messages, and then there are subliminal messages about how we see them. So within our current framework, we see Annie's sacrifice as being okay because that's what we always expect the Black women. We expect Black women to sacrifice, right? They're not right off into the sunset. And so while that may not be the director's vision, that's certainly got to be something that we got to say to each other, like, yo, that's not okay. That's not the vision I was to put in the world.
So I want to jump in here for a second. I hear you, Brother Adisa, and I didn't speak a lot on Annie since you all were doing it already, and I so appreciate it. And I also feel like I have one of the things I appreciated in the film was how no one like Annie's leadership was upfront. No one questioned Annie. When Annie said it, everybody did it. Right? Like there was no one like, well, maybe not. Maybe like when she said eat it, everybody ate the garlic. When she said don't let him in, nobody let him in. Like there's a certain sort of a recognition of her power in those moments for me in the film that I deeply appreciated. And her not surviving, well, let me not say, I think that there's, if we go into the sort of back into this question of spiritual, or the conversation around spirituality, right? Like, and as people who were whatever your background is, I'm going to say this maybe for most of the folks here, where ancestor veneration is a part of our practice in so many different ways. Annie dying didn't end her for me, right? Like that just, she just continued to work from a different place, right? Like even in her death, she called Smoke Elijah. She called him to his highest self after she had already passed on, right? Like, so there's a way in the film that I think that, but I hear you, it hurt. I think that was one of the places where I might have shed a tear when Annie got it, like that was hard. And I do really appreciate her presence in the film as the center of leadership in so many ways, right? She saw things that no one else saw, and when she said it, they listened, and that's a gift to share. That's a gift for us to be able to see.
I'm in harmony with that. I'm just saying that white men do that, they get to survive at the end. You know what I'm saying? White men get to show they get to survive at the end. And
Yeah.
the problem I have here is also, like, within the context of our framework, we understand that death is another state of existence, but ain't none of us trying to be there tonight. You know what I'm saying? Like that ain't the goal we're trying to get to right now. It's so for me, because what reason why we fight, reason why we're on this call is because life here matters. It's important to be here as long as you can be. And so I think that sometimes what I'm saying to you is I think that I agree with everything you say. I just think that it's easier for us as men to accept that okay, this is a natural progression. And I'm saying that no, it shouldn't be. It should be like we have a problem with the fact that the sister gets sacrificed, right? Like, let her be the one standing at the end, right? Because at the end, what's left is Preacher Boy gets to live, and Stag is and Mary are zombies, right? And we're left with this notion of, okay, this Empyrean perspective where on the other side is heaven for you. I'm like, but we fight for liberation here. I want to win here. I want, like that. We had that conversation later on. So for me, and also I like there are a lot of things I liked about Annie. Her physiognomy, that she was, identifiably Black woman in a tradition that we have grown to be comfortable with, right? That you can see her beauty within the context of our own cultural framework, and her leadership, and the way she learned how she could talk to other folks. To me, she's the hero. In a fantasy movie, I want to see my hero survive. That's all I'm saying. It's just so I just want to see. I go see Black Panther. I want to see Black Panther survive. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying.
That's very real, very real.
Yeah,
Aize,
I was
and then
offended that
Harry
she
Ma'at.
passed. I was definitely offended that she passed. Also,
Yes.
I have.
No,
Go ahead.
no. Give thanks for a powerful discussion, and I agree with much of what is said. And so I don't have a question, or maybe a question and a comment. So again, thank you for the panelists for definitely great presentation. I definitely agree that there was some explicit and some subliminal messages. The explicit, I think they used all the Hollywood enticements, brought out, class actors, Michael B. Jordan, yada, yada, yada. So they brought out class actors for the explicit, enticement. They brought out, some play on culture and music, and, they brought out some great cinematography. So those are some of the explicit enticements to get people. But I'm also concerned with the subliminal spiritual message, as one that
Yeah.
is, in the spiritual camp. I feel like all
Oh
of
yeah,
our
yeah. I
spiritual
have my
systems
headphones.
were, all of our spiritual systems took a L. And at the end of the day, they said either you can go the way of the demons, and that's your best life, or you could go the way of the world, and that's your best life. And all of our spiritual systems, you know, you can't look to realize that community that was spoken of in this life. You got to do something else, in another life. And so for me, I feel like they don't show, and again, we can't expect Hollywood to really help us to realize liberation. It's a Hollywood movie. And so I get that. And so we have to make sure that we are helping our young people realize that there is hope in our spiritual systems. So whether you want to go African traditional, whether you want to go, you know, whatever your spiritual system, there is hope in that. And I don't feel like they portrayed that at all. I feel like they took a shot at all of our spiritual systems subliminally, and explicitly put all of the enticements that Hollywood puts right? So people could be like, ooh, and it's a black man directing it, and he's making millions and all that. But what about, in the scripture it says you can if you gain the whole world and lose your life, what is the whole point of what you're even engaged? You lose your soul, what is the whole point? And so for me, that was the clearest point of concern, that all of our spiritual systems took an L.
Thank you. Thank you. I definitely agree with that. There's so many interesting viewpoints, so many interesting perspectives. And that's why this movie is so important to talk about, because we can look at it in the symbolic ways that Buseje's talking about, the deep cultural ways, the ways that it responds to politics and the economy. We could look at it like Adebambe says in terms of the religious aspects of it and the writing. And definitely Brother Adisa is laying it down with the psychology aspects of it, right? So I think all of these ways are important for us to look at and to kind of like sit with this movie. And if nothing else, I think that is a success, because it's making us think deeply about issues that are very important to African people. Harry Ma'at, and then Shaston, and then Damali.
For one, just to start out, I just gotta say, I feel so good being in the village right now. Like, this feels like a reunion. I got some Offset, Kemet. I got some oyster knife up in the house. I'm just having a moment. So, just that, the power and the mind, the brilliance that's in this room, and all the discussion that's touching me in so many ways, culturally, spiritually, everything. I'm just giving thanks. So I just need to get that out first. But I love Kugler. He's so powerful. And I'm really feeling everything that was said. I feel like a piece of me is feeling what I felt when I watched Fruitvale Station, the first movie I saw by him, and was floored, how much complexity he gave the brother, how much love I felt of our people coming through, and also the tragedy of the loss. Like, it was just felt so deeply. It was so well done. And I'm getting a little feeling of Black Panther too at the same time, because of the power and potential in it. But part of what's missing for me here is some of what has been just said. Like, the power, he like tapped the power and then didn't go there. It's like he housed us he pointed to the power of the blues. He pointed to the power of the Delta, that the blues has that visceral power because of the spiritual power in the Delta, Mississippi, and that has African retention in it. Like, he gave us that, but then let's imagine, because I feel like that's what Wakanda did. Like, let's imagine. And that's what didn't happen. What if the Choctaw and the Black church and the African spiritualists that was represented, the Voodoo that was represented by our sister, like, why didn't that come together and transcend the vampire? Again, why is just the blues man and the vampire standing at the end, like Adisa was talking about? Why that Wakanda level power that he's capable of, he didn't bring forth and take the message to that level? It's his right. He's a filmmaker. He can make whatever he wants. But we're here also to imagine our power. And as we're saying, for our young people to see our power, like the Africans who flew away. Like, where's that magical realism so that we defeat the vampire? The only person left standing is the blues man. I know Kugler got a lot of respect for the blues, because the blues man was left standing, and then the oppressor, the vampire, right? But he didn't let that African spiritual power and that African woman power, feminine power, transcend and be a hero. Let the evil push us to transcend to the hero, as was said earlier, and that didn't happen.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shasta. And
Hello.
I hope I'm saying your name right. Please correct me if I'm not. I'm like very, very, very tired. I've been up since 4 or 3 or 7. I don't even know at this point.
No, you got it right. It's Shaston. But yeah, I've always liked talking about this movie. I've seen it 3 times, so I've always enjoyed hearing about it and talking about it. I think one thing that I want to bring up that I feel like gets lost is talking about we focus a lot on the people that were at the juke joint, but I think there's not enough conversation about people who are left behind. Remember, Cornbread had a wife with a kid on the way, and we assume that after Sammy goes to his dad, he just leaves. So I feel like Cornbread's wife knows nothing about what happened to Cornbread. Bo and Grace is like their daughter's left at the shop. Her parents are gone. She's on her own. We don't know what happens, and the movie I think gives a really hopeful ending to it, but I think there's always kind of the asterisk marks of what about the people that were left behind. And when you think about it from that perspective, it's a little it's not as much of an uplifting ending when you think of it from that perspective.
Wow, thank you, because that is something to think about. And then I think if you look at it in uh, a broader context about the African people that are left behind. Sage, you look like you want to say
Yeah.
something to that.
Yeah, I just want to say something that I appreciate. I appreciate that. I've thought a lot about it, Shasta, around like what happens. And I think for me, one of the I'm a student of Cabral, so I'm a big on tell no lies, claim no easy victories, right? Like so let's this idea of like what happens when our people have access to white power and who gets left behind. We abandon our communities. We forget where we came from. So again, this idea of like becoming a vampire is access to adjacency to whiteness, right? And then so yeah, people get left behind. People leave people behind. They leave communities behind. They pretend they're what is the somebody knows this movie where the white woman is passing and she denigrates her mother. I can't think of it. Oh, old movie.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Imitation of Life.
Imitation
The
of Life.
Imitation of Life.
Yeah, right. Like this adjacency to whiteness, white power, gold, money, this life, we leave people behind. And so when I was watching that and I was thinking about what happens to folks who have no idea what happened, right? That felt allegorical. Allegorical. I don't know if that's a real word. It felt like an allegory for that.
Right, thank you. Damali and then Kamal.
Actually, Nozibile, could I interject real quick before we bring somebody
Sure,
on?
sure.
So I don't want to have it go too far. We have one of our community elders that we're happy to see on the line, Baba Naeem Akbar. I would be remiss to not at least one, give you thanks for all of your work. I know Adisa is excited, all the psychology that he's talking about, and then we have you on here joining us. So if you have anything you'd like to share, then please, the floor is yours to share, and then we'll continue on with the rest of the program. Okay. Okay, thanks, Baba Naeem. Thank you. Okay,
Thank
Damali,
you.
and then Kamal.
All right, peace, everybody. So I wanted to share
Peace.
about the comment that the spirituality in the movie did not show up as powerful. It was some kind of, um, uh, you know, statement to that. And I disagree because I do say towards the end, when that mojo bag that Annie created was around the twins' neck, it wasn't his faith in the mojo, it was actually her faith. He carried it, but that caused his twin, if you remember, to sniff and draw back. And that gave him the disadvantage at that point because he was right there in the clutches of his twin to get bit. So that did show up, that her faith in that mojo bag was powerful and protective, which was the intent. And then in the prayer, when Sammy, and I hope I have the character right now, the guitar, when he was clutched up, and he had, the devil right there, and he was so scared. All he could go to was what he knew. So he went, in his fear, he went to the Lord's Prayer, and he started speaking it. And then the devil, or the vampire, in that moment, he started reciting it too, and it was like, yeah, I used that too, but it didn't work for me when I used it. But in the movie, if you notice, the other vampires, because they were connected with all, with that hive mind of that lead vampire, they started saying the Lord's Prayer, but Sammy said it all the way through as well. He finished it. And then next thing you know, some events started to take place, and he was able to escape out the clutch. In that moment for me, and actually for both of them, it came down to faith. And the faith that she had in her hoodoo and the faith that he had in that prayer, both times they were about to get got. But in those instances, certain events started to take place that they did not. And so for me, that showed for me that the spirituality that was being displayed, and it was so opposite. You have the hoodoo and you have the Christian faith. But at the end of the day, for me, it came down to faith and what you put your faith in. Not necessarily which one, but faith itself. So I just wanted to share that in response to that comment.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And then I see Busage wrote the vampire hive mind is cultural hegemony. All right, Kamal.
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's been wonderful to hear all the conversation and the perspectives. I have a question. Can you all, it could be anyone of the panelists, just expound more on like the piece on chanting and your anthropology work or your spiritual work, or on how that, the piece where you were talking earlier about reclaiming space and time, and just on that perspective, on that piece from the movie.
Let me talk on that a little bit. So, in traditional Yoruba religion and Yoruba thought, there are poems that are recited which have the power to alter reality. So, for example, there is a certain type of ebo. Ebo is a sacrifice, right? That we do, which we call ebu riru. Ebu riru basically is when a divination is done, you get a sign, which we call an odu, and it's printed out on a board. That particular sign translates to hundreds, if not thousands, of different poems that can be recited, just like you would have in the Bible. You would have a Proverbs, and you would have Psalms, right? That can relate to that client's issue. So what ends up happening is that when you chant those particular poems in a certain way, and there's certain esoteric words that are recited, those have the power to heal that person, or to, at the very least, open up a pathway for that person to get what they want. Mm. So the more I've been involved with that type of practice, the more I realize that what we say, as well as our thoughts, have much more power than we think. Cussing is not just saying the F word or saying a certain word that is deemed as bad. It's when you say something and you have that thing want to manifest. So, for example, if you say, I hope you die tomorrow, something like that, right? You can't take those things lightly. Those are very important things and have a definitely profound effect. And, in this society that we live in, all of us have been guilty of being frivolous with our words. Mm. And we often don't think about the fact that our words do have the power to affect change. There are certain chants you can say in Yoruba which can literally cause someone to get sick instantly. There are certain chants you can say that will cause someone to start healing instantly. There have been cases, I have not witnessed this, but some of my elders have witnessed this, when someone looked as if they were dead and they chanted over them, and that person all of a sudden came back. Yeah. So in the blues, in this context, See, a lot of our culture, particularly and maybe the vampires can recognize that, because there's this obsession with Sammy in the movie, and the vampires wanted to get a hold of him, symbolic almost in the sense of we want to commercialize a sacred music and a sacred practice. Because as you know, the blues, as well as gospel, as well as Steel Hollow's work songs, those come out of a sacred tradition. Like this idea of entertainment just being to entertain people and not being to transform reality is kind of a European concept. If you look at ancient musics and the evolution of music over time in human societies, 9 times out of 10, it was also tied to a sacred purpose. And the original artists were people who were also initiated sometimes into some type of priesthood, right? That's why you had guilds in different West African societies where the person who's the blood keeper, I'm going to use that term to the griot, right? The blood keepers, that's a sacred caste. It is a caste. It is a position in society, but yet it has a sacred role to it, right? So that's where I see it. That's the way I see it. And I see that a lot of the lyrics and things that we take for granted, that's why we have to be very careful with this whole talking with Chairman Fred Jr. Here in Chicago not too long ago, and we both agreed that this idea of recent hip hop being used as a way to kind of neutralize movement and movement thought, right? And I think we take for granted the power of popular culture and the power of words and lyrics and language, and how that can really radicalize or de-radicalize, unradicalize the people and close portals instead of opening those portals. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I could add to
Yeah.
that. So I think that part of this is like the reason why we can't see it is because we haven't demystified it, right? So
Mhm.
we focus on the music and not the science, right? So if I say that by show of hands, how many of y'all listen to music? Raise your hand. Everybody's gonna raise their hand, but you don't listen to music. You feel music. The eardrum is a vibrational instrument, and we live in a world in which vibration is what moves things, right? So what makes me different from the next person is both the frequency and the intensity of the vibration. Everything vibrates. So when Bob is talking about like changing reality, it's not a metaphysical thing. It's understanding the physical laws of nature and working in harmony with them, right? So we've all been in spaces where somebody come in, their attitude is all jacked up, it changes everybody's attitude in the room. That's a vibration. It's not a the N word has a vibration to it that has an impact on reality. The B word has a vibration to it. Your mama calling you by your full name have a vibration that lets you know you feel that differently. And so part of what happens is what we do is we take out the science and we make it mystical. It's not mystical. It's very simple here. On Sunday, if the pastor's starting to give the sermon and the choir and the congregation they respond, the way they call the choir back out there. It ain't to have a party, it's to change the vibration. Change the vibration so that you can create the portal. When you pull an old dude and you read the Pataki, right? It's how one of the things you trained is how to read the Pataki, right? What the rhythm is of the Pataki, because you can't just say the word. You have to say that it's yours is a tonal language. You have to say it in a rhythm that corresponds with a certain vibration that unlocks other kinds of properties. And I think that
Yeah.
what we miss is that because we don't understand how sonics work along with vibration in this physical realm, and we tell kids like, look, you shouldn't listen to that music because it's going to change the way you think. It's not. It's like it's actually suddenly it's altering the way your cells are responding in that moment. And so we see this in stereotype threat. We see this in imposter syndrome, right? It's a function of a cellular response. That's why people are showing up in the counseling centers because of how they feel, right? So I think that part of the process here is to recognize that, hey, what's happening, music is a conduit, right? There's a lot of research now that says that, look, if you have music and expressiveness in the classroom, Black boys do better overall. If you have movement and expressive in the classroom, Black girls do better. If you have movement and expression in the classroom, music, movement, and expression in the classroom, white children do better. The only condition which everybody else struggles in is the condition which we have, which is no music and no movement, right? So part of the reason boys are struggling in school is because their home condition and the school condition are disparate. At home, you got all the sensate stimuli all the time. You're learning, like you're moving. It's a kinesiology to this. So part of the challenge is that when we're looking at behavioral problems, right? That part of it is about the fact we don't understand vibration and the role that sonics play in the vibration that creates a context, right? When you come into a certain place, the kind of music that's playing tells you what to expect in the space, tells you how to respond, how to accord yourself. So when you start when you hear somebody do a libation and there's a rhythm to it, that rhythm is about generating vibration. They're not just talking about inviting answers. They're creating a vibration that opens the portal for them to come into that space. And I think that we have to talk about more about these things in terms of what we know in terms of empirical science that we can show. Like these things work when we do them, and when we leave them out, or we approach them from an aberrant perspective, we are privileging the profane over the sacred. And so
And I
part of the challenge is to really figure out how we introduce those things back into our community.
And I would like to take that a little bit further because we all know that um, our experiences here as Africans in America has changed us drastically. And one of the ways that it has changed us, I don't like to hear people say that we have been separated from our culture or that we no longer practice African culture because our Africanness is going to show up whether we like it or not. It shows up in our language, it shows up in our movement. But another thing that we have to understand that I think one of the major things that has been done to her African people is to sever us from our ways of seeing the world, right? So when we talk about how we see the world in terms of perception, we can go and look at what, European people see the world in terms of sight, sound, touch, taste, feel. They have a world view, right? Instead of a world sense, because African people, we sense the world. If you look at other African cultures, like the Yeve people, for example, or the Ewe people, for example, when they look at the world, they have more than 5 senses. They're looking beyond sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. They have a whole thing. It's a feeling in the stomach. It is a something that they feel in their fingertips. They have at least 9 or 10 other senses that they use that European people don't use. In addition to that, that is one of the reasons that will help us to be able to look at their environment, because what Brother Adebambe and Brother Adisa are saying is definitely correct, because they essentialize and they trivialize African belief systems by saying that it's just magic, right? It's just something that happens. But they don't understand that we have thousands of years to protect this science, to perfect it. We had thousands of years of examining the stars and the plants and the herbs to see what's effective, right? And another thing that I think is dangerous when we talk about African quote unquote tradition, it's like a life system. Because when you say tradition, you stick it in the past. And then when you stick something in the past, you don't look at how it evolves. You don't look at it and compare with modernity, right? So African tradition is something that they used to do back then. It's not something that we bring into the forefront. African tradition is alive, it's well, it replicates, it reproduces, it changes, and it's something that's very active. And we're still examining the earth, we're still examining the world, we're still examining how we need to move within it, right? So I want us to really just be mindful and conscious of that.
No, it's really, can I just
Can I say?
piggyback
Yeah,
on what you
yeah.
said?
Yeah. And then Sage and then Charles.
Quickly, even how we use English language is limited, because I think Wande Abimbola says English is not true communication. So for example, in Yoruba, the word for tradition, quote unquote, would be isheshe. Now, isheshe really can be translated as progenitors, right? People that came before you. But if you look at the African mindset, those that came before with us today, so they're not in the past, So there's no such thing then from that context as tradition being something that's linked to the past. Tradition is present and future, what we're doing continuously, right? It's interesting that one of the key aspects of Odu Ifa, because you can technically say them outside of Yoruba, you can say them in English or other languages, but the things that should not be changed are the names of the priest or priestess cast that particular verse first in the past, because there's ashe and power in always calling on your progenitor, and the progenitor presides over what's happening now. Okay, so I'm even as I'm learning Yoruba and learning other, you do start to change, your mindset starts to shift and change, and you begin to realize how a lot of what we view in this reality is very linear. It has a beginning, it has an end, and African spirituality, African concepts of reality are more, it's like this, right? So yes, our progenitors are with us, and our future offspring are with us. There's not past or future. And once again, in that piece that Coogler did in that one shot, which I thought was the best part of the film, where he shows the whole history of Black music in one sweeping shot, he kind of deals with some of that in the movie. I'll land my plane.
So I'm thinking about how nerdy to get, because Brother Adisa, you when you started talking about science, and then following up with what you were saying, Nosy Bele, I think one of the things that is both the value of cultural work and the challenge of it is when we sort of break things into pieces, and look at this piece or that piece when things are also meant to be digested as wholes, their interconnectedness. So Brother John, when you started mentioning science, right, like and the mysticism and the science, my mind immediately went to there's a concept in complexity science, quantum physics, which we should all just understand as African Indigenous ontology, right? So I'm using the word quantum physics, but it's all, African Indigenous ontology, is the strange attractor. And the strange attractor is an example in which there's like this odd thing off to the side. And then there's this cluster on the other side, right? Like, and this one thing starts to vibrate at such a rate, it siphons off that which is in the cluster. So the cluster then moves to the thing that was initially strange or unusual. Part of the reason that is interesting to me and how that operates inside the film Sinners is because it is a message for us to think about how we assess the progress of movement, right? Like where in which we are, how are we moving the masses and to where, right? So it also harkens back to your comment earlier about identity and the role and the importance of identity and politic being interrelated so that we have a sense of belonging, and we have that sense of belonging towards a particular direction, right? And that is part of what this sort of interconnectedness complexity that I kind of heard in Nosy Bele's comment and your comment and Brother Ade's. I just wanted to offer up as a frame. And I'm gonna pass it to Chibuela. What's up?
Big brother Chibuera, go ahead and step to the mic.
Man, I'm eating. I got a mouthful of fish cake right now. But I do want to say, excuse me, good to see old sisters and brothers. Good to see new faces. And I really appreciate the conversations that have been taking place tonight. You see me, I'm in the chat all up in it because I enjoy listening to what's going on. I do have some ideas. I mean, I'll one I want to share. You was asked about the Irishness and why remix ethnic identity means so much. And that scene, that single shot that Coogler so expertly pulls off. And I think we forget what a brilliant technical director he is. The movie also, for me, is a really bold statement about the cultural history of the United States from below, and the various cultures, African, indigenous, Chinese immigrants, right? We haven't spoken about, so the presence of the Chinese community in the Delta at that time, the white immigrants who are coming over, and it's an interesting way to think about the spiritual foundation, the political foundation, economic foundation of the society. Thinking about Seje's comments, I like, and she brought in, Fred Hampton. I do like the idea that Remick is proposing a certain type of working class utopianism. The challenge is, which is historically a problem, is that sort of working class consciousness is so wrapped up in sort of parasitic white supremacy, right? And Remick becomes a perfect example of that contradiction, the hopefulness of it, but at the same time, the damaging nature of that relationship, because, right, the working class cannot escape their racism in terms of any type of real unity with Black working class struggle. So I'll just say that. But it's really beautiful. I'm enjoying this conversation. I've seen the movie 3 times. I will see it again, because every time I go, there's something new that pops up. And, to paraphrase Sajay, if you haven't seen the movie, the ending blows my mind. I've been to Buddy Guy's Club in Chicago, and that brother carries the spirit of the blues with him from the Delta to Chicago and every place in between. Love seeing all of y'all. And you're right, oyster knife, baby. This is the first time we've been together in like decades.
Thank you very much, Toba. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make any comments before we close out the session?
Peace. Yes, I would. I have a question for Brother Ade Bombay. He didn't get to it, but I want to say, was those scarifications at the end of the movie on Buddy Guy? Those, were they Yoruba markings? Because I've also seen those markings on Mosi people from Burkina, and also those markings again in people from Niger. I wanted to confirm it with you. I think I have seen those markings on my Yoruba butcher in Cote d'Ivoire. Kugler also, he brought in a few different, that scene of the spirit not being subject to chronological time, where he had everything from the African drum to the kora, the ngoni, the apang, all of those instruments. Even to George Clinton, I think he had a caricature of P-Funk in there as well. But I want to confirm it with you. Was that a Yoruba? Because that's the first thing that stepped out, that came out to me, was that scarification.
I don't think he intended to do anything specific with that. It just seemed to me that it was a shout out to African scarification generally. But from what I know, different branches of Yoruba culture, like the Egba, the Ijebu, the Akiti, Yoruba, they'll have markings on their face to represent that branch of Yoruba people. But a lot of times, that's a general practice throughout traditional West African societies in general, right? He threw a lot of stuff on there. Like I said before, I think he obviously was doing a lot of research about a lot of different things African, and was like throwing it together in one big pot, right? But I don't necessarily think it necessarily had the kind of significance. I know that that was a scar from the vampire, right? If I'm not mistaken. That left, and then Buddy Guy's character, what he grew to Buddy Guy, that was also there as well. It's per se, but we can debate that.
For me, it was like in the end, like even musically, like I think Africans have the flyest guitar players out these days since they took music out of the school for us, that they have held that tradition in terms of stringed instruments. Um, and I've always asserted that that banjo, the colonial name of Banjul was Bathurst. And when they went back to the African name of the capital city of the Gambia, they went back to Banjul, and there's no coincidence in the sound of the word sound of banjo and Banjul. And also, he showed a traditional Ivorian dance in there, the zo. He showed that.
Was it Zali?
Yeah, they call it zo, but Zauli. And I can't remember what particular ethnic group it is, but it's the Gru. That's who it is. It's the Gru.
Voodoo.
Yeah, closer to Liberia, the east side of Cote d'Ivoire. And like the brother was saying, um, it's a way of life that's living in West African people versus being I think Nelson Vele was saying that it's a way of life that continues to this very day in West Africa, and it's like um, it's devoid of any type of initiation. You have those people that have never left the land, and those traditions are in those people. And it's like what Sister Nosenbelly was saying. It's also in African American people, but I think as the generations continue to go and to evolve, I think that we're being tricked out of our birthright and out of our natural sciences based on, just assimilation. Uh, I would want this panel to speak to this. I know it's kind of a old subject, but it's the whole notion of nowadays you have African people would rather be anything other than African, in the sense of naming themselves ADOs and FBAs, and um, now you got brothers wearing war bonnets, and uh, you don't have a single indigenous person in your family. My grandmother, mother, straight indigenous, but I'm not wearing a war bonnet playing the Indian game with people. Uh, Mississippian Indians. I was born near um, Angel Mounds, which is a pre-Neolithic structure in southern Indiana. But I want the panel to speak to this lack of identity amongst our people in regards to the movie Sinners. Would you please?
I guess I'll take this one up. So let me start by saying this. So whenever you have one culture that tries to impose itself on another culture, there are one of four responses. The first one is authentic response, like that culture tries to impose itself, but you still maintain your culture and its authenticity. The next one is adopted. You adopt some element of that culture, right? A good example of this would be that horses were not native to indigenous peoples. They adopted that and they brought that. They adopted that. Then there are adaptations. You take parts of the culture, your culture, and their culture, and you kind of mix it together. And then the fourth part is aberrant, right? Like that, like there's just a distortion. And so I think it's important to recognize that that you can see the culture, as the sister so eloquently said, it's in us. It just shows up in sometimes in aberrant ways, right? So African people are always written on the walls, always written on the walls, right? But they do, but in New York City, it shows up as graffiti. You know what I'm saying? Like so, or what they're talking about. So part of the challenge is to look beneath the layers of sediment of white supremacy to see beneath beneath all of that, is there still an Africanity that's still operating, just being expressed in ways that are not necessarily that don't show up as African right away, right? Our relationship to the language, our relationship to music, our relationship to movement. The problem is that cultural formations have to also find ways to grow and flower on their own terms. And when you exist in a oppressive context, it creates a limitation on the kinds of expressions. So, which is why I say that I always talk about. I never say African religion. I say African spiritual systems because it's a system within an overarching life system. And when you are under siege, you on the move. You have to take pieces of it. So you take the religious piece and you lose the other parts of it. I think that when you look at one of the critical pieces of the movie when it says, jelly means the word blood, and one of the things we always have is that blood has memory. So when the vampire is talking to the Chinese woman, he's telling her, "I know what you like, what your husband likes to do, because in taking his blood, I have taken his memory." For me, what that also says is that there's a prescription here that our blood has the memory, and when it finds this opportunity to actually fully express itself, then it shows up. And when it doesn't, it has to make other adjustments. So the idea that we will lose that won't lose. I always tell people, look, African peoples will die. That's the nature. But African people them won't. Like we've been here from the beginning. We're gonna be here always through. The question is always about how we survive that, how we set up our identity. And I think it's important that to make this point that when we talk about African American identity, we oftentimes talk as if there was an amalgamation between the African identity and the European identity. It was not. African American is wholly composite of African communities, right? It's the folk from the Senegambia, it's the folk from the Congo, it's from the Bida Biafra that they come together and create this African American culture is actually a Pan-African cultural expression in the context of an oppressive situation. So when you're looking in the Mississippi Delta, we're only about 4% of the Africans who came, only about 4% of the Africans who came over here were Yoruba, and they were concentrated primarily in Louisiana and Mississippi. So that Afrikaans is going to look a little bit different in Mississippi and Louisiana than it does in Charleston, South Carolina, or in the Georgia Low Country. What allows us to see it is that there is a thread that runs through all of that, right? The sense of time and space, the sense of rhythm, our relationship to language. And so so identity is created by two things. One, your personal identity and your reference group orientation. Our problem is the reference group orientation. Because the reference group orientation is what's also impacting on the identity piece, right? So if you had at Irvine, which is 3% black folks, right? So it means that you can have a personal identity as a black person, but if you're at a campus with overwhelmingly white, your reference group might be white folks. So that you show up like Clarence Thomas. But there's always that Africanity in there. It's just that we have to find. This is why identity formation is important. Why political economy is important. Why seeing our systems as life systems are important because if we can, and why these conversations are important because what we're trying to do is we're telling black folks we believe you're black. That's not the question. We try to get you to have a reference group orientation that's consistent with your personal identities, so we can make the kind of progress we need to make. So I think that's always going to be a constant. The problem is for us to make the shifts to a reference group orientation that reflects our Africanity.
Thank you,
I
brother.
hope that makes sense. I'm talking.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Buseje or Debambe, did you want to speak anything to that?
No, I think Brother Disa did a great job. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so if each of you wants to just give something brief in terms of, I guess, a summary of your feelings, then really, if we don't have any other questions, that could be what closes us out for the evening.
The only thing I want to say is that we've been putting some books in the chat that were mentioned during this conversation. I like the fact that this conversation led to a book list. I mentioned two, one by Katrina Hazard called Mojo Working, other one called Black Magic by Yvonne Choureau. Yvonne Choureau was the woman who Kugler referred to for his information on hoodoo. So that book definitely relates to it. Also, Development Arrested about the blues. Definitely that Buseja had mentioned. I definitely want to pick that one up too. So any other people have anything to put in the chat, definitely put that there in the chat. And for last comment, I think it's important for those of us here who definitely have certain research background and certain knowledge to start putting together books, movies, films that deal with that, right? I don't know if Ryan Coogler had read Urugu by Dr. Mirbani, another book, he would realize that some of his ideology and worldview may have been a little off. But once again, we appreciate the step in the right direction. So I think those of us who consider ourselves to be part of the radical tradition or part of African spirituality need to start getting our heads together and producing work, right? That speaks more to what we know to be the truth. That's it.
Peace. Thank you, bro. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll close up following up a little bit on that, Brother Dave Bombay. Just your last point about making work. I just want to shout out Black Liberation Media as a company making content and places you can go. You can find them on YouTube and see the work that they're producing out of that house. I think my final thoughts are just like I just really appreciate this conversation. Like I don't need my cultural content to make me feel good. I want it to make me think. I want it to make me wrestle, and I want it to push me along the revolutionary road. And I think that's what this movie has done for me. And I'm grateful to be having a conversation with you all about it.
Man, so grateful to have you here as well. Definitely, definitely.
Yeah, I was
Pizza.
I was just echo. Look, I'm glad to be in contact and conversation with the folks, and to be in contact with their brilliance. Um, but Dembe, I've seen you on Facebook. We've been on threads together, but I've never had a chance to, to have a conversation with you. So it was wonderful to be able to do that. And Sister Sajay, like don't often get a chance to have conversations like hear people talk about political economy and the like. So I appreciate the elevation of that discourse. And of course, anytime you can get scholars who are anthropologists who come in and bring something like. But what I also appreciated was the fact that people showed up, and the fact that everybody on the panel really listened to each other and were responding in conversation and not taking like showtime at the plot. Take your time on the stage to do your thing. So I very much appreciate that. And of course, Ayator, I love you, man. I appreciate all that you do for the community.
Appreciate you too, bro.
We're Facebook friends, right? Baba Adisa?
Yeah, yep, sure.
With DM because I make it to California, and I hope that we can put this on YouTube, right? This conversation.
We should be able to. It is being recorded. If each of you has a website or Instagram or anything you'd like to share with the audience and for the archives, if you can drop that in the chat, just for the record. But definitely, I want to thank everyone that came out. This is probably one of the flyest KMTspeaks that we've had thus far. Very, very insightful, very, very engaging. I know I personally took a lot of notes. I have to now go back and see the movie again to do some views through some different lenses. But definitely, I hope you all enjoyed the conversation as much as myself and Nozibile did, as well as our panelists. We did drop a link if you wanted to be on our mailing list when we announce future events. Otherwise, you can find out about us however you found out about us tonight. But we definitely have more programs that'll be coming within the next few months. Shout out to Baba Malcolm X. Just recently would have been 100 years old. We're celebrating his life and legacy this month. Just as well as preparing for, continuing to prepare life around this particular president that we have. So everybody stay focused, stay diligent, stay safe. But we appreciate you all very much. Thank you very much for joining us. There's plenty of information in the chat that you can connect with. We'll probably drop this on YouTube somewhere. So those of you that are friends amongst here will share that information with you all as well. But thank you very much, Brother Adisa. Thank you very much, Ade Bombay. Thank you very much, Buseje. Appreciate you all very much. Thanks for all your questions and your energy. So everyone have a good, man, May is almost finished already. But have a good rest of the year. Have a good time. Stay strong, stay healthy. And we look forward to seeing you all in the near future. Peace.
Thank
Y'all
you
reach
so
out.
much.
I'm available.
Peace, family. Peace, peace.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
I'm almost
Jalsanel.
Life, strength, and
trying to
health.
save the chat before I logged off.
Oh yeah, get it?
Yeah, I'm trying to write down titles here.
Oh
If you
man.
save the chat, then you can keep on.
I don't see the save the chat.
If you go all the way to the top, there are these little buttons where at the title of it, these 3 buttons.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So you said,
Okay, I see. Thank you.
hey, Ayator, you said that the sign up to find out about more events you guys are putting on is in the chat?
Yeah, we did put a link there.
Okay.
But I think you and I are connected in some other spaces too, so you should be able to find out. But there is a mailing list link.
Well, I didn't know about this one till a couple days ago, but okay, I got you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all as well.
Much peace. It was great.
Okay, peace.
I dropped the invitation for Way of Remembering, sponsored by Prometra. We go to Benin every January for Vodun Day, which the day of the Vodun, which is in January 2026. So we have information calls, and the links are right there, and also a Google Doc if you want more information.
Wonderful, thank you. I see that there. That's part of the chat I saved. Anyway, good people, y'all have a good night. Stay strong, and we'll see y'all soon.